Good morning and welcome to the first tactics board of the season. Norwich City's championship campaign kicks off with Hull's visit to Carrow Road on Saturday, and I'm going to bring you my predicted 11 and tactical preview, as I will for every one of the Canaries League games this season. So I'm going to get straight into it and show you the team that I think David Wagner will pick for Saturday's game. So I've got Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Ben Gibson at centre back, Dimitris Yannoulis at left back, Gabriel Sara and Kenny McLean in midfield, with Ono Hernandez on the left, Christian Fasnacht on the right, Ashley Barnes in a sort of number 10 role, but I expect he'll be a little bit of a hybrid between a number 9 and number 10, and Josh Sargent up front. And you'll notice it is the same team that Wagner started that win over Olympiacos with in his final pre-season game of the year. Obviously they won that game 2-0 and played, I think, quite impressively at times, and we'll get into some of the issues that were present in that game later on, and we'll discuss their build-up play. But I think generally there were a lot of aspects Wagner would have been pleased with, not too many chances conceded, and that's been a theme of pre-season. Norwich looking solid at the back, and obviously they've collected a lot of clean sheets against some very respectable opposition, so I think that's going to be a feature of Norwich's play going forward. And I think he used that game at Carrow Road as a bit of a dress rehearsal, really, so it probably makes sense that he would choose the same team for Saturday's game. I think there are a couple of players that are probably worth discussing and that could come out of that, but for me I think it will be the same one. So just to go from the back, I've got Angus Gunn in goal, and I don't think anybody's expecting anything different. Came in for Tim Krul last season, and although David Wagner did temporarily replace him with the Dutchman, he's just proven himself slightly too error prone when Norwich are playing with such fine margins, and that looks like it's going to be a theme of Wagner's football. As I've said, if you look at his Huddersfield team and how successful they were, a lot of those games were narrow wins. I think they were promoted with a negative goal difference, so it shows you how big of an impact those errors can have. And after Tim Krul made a couple last season, I would be surprised if he comes back in. I don't think anybody's expecting Angus Gunn not to start this game on Saturday, and it's similar really with Jack Stacey at right back. I know Max Aarons hasn't left the building yet, and there probably hasn't been as much interest as the club would like, but equally he is a Norwich player and he would be up for selection. However, he didn't play a single minute of Norwich's pre-season. You'd like to think he's a little bit more match fit than maybe most players when they come back for pre-season, because he obviously won the under-21 Euros with England in his final appearance for that team. But I think he's had a few weeks without any match practice. He doesn't really look like he's part of the plans at the moment, to be honest. Kellen Fisher has come in and done really well and looks like solid backup in the right back position, and I think Norwich are planning for life without him, to be honest. So I expect Jack Stacey to start at right back, and I would be very, very surprised if that's different. And it's the same with Shane Duffy, really, who was another constant feature of pre-season, and when those games seemed to turn slightly more into dress rehearsals and away from just putting minutes in the legs, he was regularly getting selected, and it seemed to be between Ben Gibson and Omobamidele as to who would be beside him, and that's the situation I see for Saturday. I think it's probably a fight between those two to see who will play at left centre-back, but at right centre-back I absolutely see Shane Duffy playing there. And on the left, this might be a little bit of a surprise because AC Milan have reportedly bid for his competition in this position, but I think Ben Gibson will start. He's Wagner's sort of player, really. He's very good organisationally and structurally, and I think what he lacks in pace, he makes up for with a little bit of know-how and experience, and we know how important that attitude is to David Wagner because he spoke about it as an issue so much towards the back end of last season, and obviously recruited to deal with that problem this summer. So I think Ben Gibson will slot in there, and the good news is, although Wagner does quite like a press, they spend a lot of the time under him sort of camped in and not having to deal with balls in behind, and that suits Gibson very well. He's still a very good defender from a sort of old school perspective, great at tackling blocks, putting his body on the line and knowing where to stand and marking well and heading the ball away. And I think those aspects will come in handy more so under David Wagner than maybe they did under Dean Smith and Daniel Farke. So I see him starting on Saturday. We know he is slightly error prone, so how long that lasts for, we'll see, and hopefully he has a good season, and that's not a worry. But I think he may be slightly vulnerable in that team, and he's probably one of those ones where you're discussing the choice. But I do see him starting, as do I see Dimitris Yannoulis starting, and I'm not sure whether Sam McCallum's on the naughty step at the moment, but he didn't see much game time in pre-season really, especially towards the latter stages. Played a little bit of time at centre-back at Carrow Road on Saturday, but I don't see that being where he progresses, especially given he seems a slightly attack-minded fullback. And I think this actually could be a season for Dimitris Yannoulis to shine. I know he hasn't really endeared Norwich fans to him too much over the last couple of years, but you look back at the sort of first 6 months he spent in yellow and green, and he showed what technical ability and what potential he had, but he needs a system to suit him really, and he can't be relied upon to do too much defending if you want to use him in that creative role. So I think Wagner's system suits him, where a lot of that creativity comes from out wide and from the fullbacks, and I think at times that's a little bit of a fault of the system, but it's great news for Dimitris Yannoulis because it means he can bomb forward, and we saw that actually work to great effect in the early stages of Wagner's tenure when Norwich impressed so much, scoring so many goals in those big wins over Preston and Coventry, and hopefully we can see more replications of that sort of form rather than what Yannoulis was showing towards the back end of last season. In midfield, I've gone for Sarah and McLean, and I don't really see that changing, especially given Jakob Sorensen, who's probably Norwich's most defensive midfielder, has struggled with injury issues. I think Sarah and McLean are pretty nailed on. Sarah obviously expected to be a very key player, missed a significant proportion of pre-season, but now is back from injury, and Wagner tried to make up with that with as much minutes as possible in those last two pre-season games, and I do see him starting alongside McLean, who's Mr. Reliable, obviously scored that deflected goal against Olympiacos, and I think will be a key player for Norwich once again, as he has been pretty much since he signed, to be honest. And then we come to the sort of front four. I don't think Christian Fastnacht's place in the team is much up for grabs. Obviously, the only signing Norwich made for any money so far this pre-season, and we don't expect to see any more unless sort of key players leave that need to be replaced. And I think his pedigree speaks for itself. Obviously scored that headed goal on his debut and didn't do too much against Olympiacos, to be honest, but he's had a full pre-season with young boys before he even came to Norwich, and I think he should be ready to go, and Wagner has a significant amount of trust in him. Some good quotes from him actually up on our website and on our app right now, so I would recommend going and having a look at those. But yeah, it looks like a player that could be a really big one for Norwich if things work out. On the left, I've gone for Onel Hernandez, and this is the one that was the most difficult choice for me because I don't think he's really impressed at all in pre-season. Not looked like the trademark character that Norwich fans know and love, but equally he sort of thrives on that atmosphere and that energy that you don't really get in pre-season games. So perhaps he will thrive more in an environment of a first game of the season than he did in those friendlies or tests, as David Wagner likes them called. And he does have a lot of faith in him, and that's why I've put him in the team. But equally, it's a very tight battle, I think, between him and John Rowe for that position. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the younger man start, because he did have a really, really good pre-season actually, and against Olympiacos looked like somebody who got fans up on their feet. Put the ball in the net actually, and as well as threading the ball through for Josh Sargent, who did the same, but both of those instances were offside, and maybe he was slightly unlucky, especially with his one really. That was very, very tight. Not to have made a more tangible mark and a more tangible impact, and I think that was a good sign because he probably does need to improve that end product and matching that excitement with moments that can win the team games, and I think he is capable of that. He's shown that at youth levels, but to do that in the Championship is a very different thing. But I think he could start, but I've just gone with Onel Hernandez because I think that probably suits David Wagner's logic slightly more. Up front, Ashley Barnes and Josh Sargent looks like it's going to be a front two, and I sort of worried about that, especially given the build-up issues I'm going to come on to now. I sort of worried that there would be two very direct strikers and that there wouldn't be much of a link between the defence and the attack. But Barnes actually really surprised me, especially towards the latter stages of pre-season, with his ability to actually come in, and his technical ability is good. His hold-up play is good. he can find players well and drop into nice pockets of space, and I expect to see him playing that role more than Josh Sargent, who will probably be running in behind and scoring the most goals, because Barnes doesn't have that good of a goal scoring record. He's got a decent one, and scored 12 goals in one Premier League season, but in the Championship he's not really. I don't think he's ever broken the 20 goal mark, and he's not really proven himself as a natural goal scorer. So I think he'll add a lot to the team. I've been really impressed with him so far, not only his attitude and his off the pitch and everything that he's known for, but on the pitch as well, he's been really good. So I've been impressed so far, and I expect to see him start. Josh Sargent, as I just spoke about, really expected to be the main source of goals for Norwich this season, and that is a little bit of pressure for him, but I think he's shown that he can do it at Championship level before, with a little bit of help probably from Barnes and Sara, and hopefully from Fasnacht and Borja Sainz when he comes back from injury as well. I think Sargent can be that leading man, but still a good amount of pressure on him after Tamer Pukki left. So that's my starting 11. Going to now come on to a tactical aspect that I wanted to discuss, and that is the build-up play. I've got this diagram here to show what Norwich look like when they're in that build-up phase. And the problem with this is just how vertical it is. And you see with the fullbacks sort of advanced on either side, and McLean dropping in, it's basically only Gabriel Sara between Shane Duffy and Ben Gibson and the strikers. And I think that's a problem, because as much as you do have that step-by-step build-up, all it takes is for clubs to cover off one option. Really, they only need 3 players to block all the available options for Shane Duffy or Ben Gibson when they've got the ball. And I think that was actually quite evident in Saturday's game. As much as I was impressed with a few elements, especially defensively, I think on the ball when they were building up, I was quite worried with the amount of time it took for Shane Duffy or Ben Gibson to be presented with any options when they were on the ball. And people spoke to me and replied to me on Twitter especially about how they felt that Norwich were sort of inviting the press, and that does make sense given that they've thrived on the counter, and they might almost try and manufacture that environment where there's space behind for them to attack. But I didn't really notice much of a movement once that press did come. It often just ended up sort of going long or going out to a fullback. There didn't seem to be options that opened up after that press was there. So I'm slightly worried about that build-up play, but equally, David Wagner will have a plan for it. My only issue is that throughout his career, really, and speaking to our tactical expert, Ben Lee, it seems that throughout his career there's been issues with build-up and questions around whether his teams are especially good at it. So I think that's a little bit of a worry for Norwich. They haven't looked particularly good at creating against more deep blocks, and if teams work out that that's what Norwich want, that they want that press, then perhaps they'll be reluctant to give it, and Norwich may be slightly lost. But yeah, it's a little bit of a difficult one really to see a way around, especially while Wagner's in charge, and he seems very, very committed to this style of play and to having this build up. I remember we asked him about it at some point last season, and he didn't really suggest any willingness to change. So that's one slight issue that I would watch out for, but there are ways around it, and if they can invite that press and then play through it well, then they'll be in a fantastic position. But I think they maybe have slightly fewer players who are capable of doing that than they used to in years prior, and that will be an interesting challenge for Norwich, not only against Hull, but throughout the season coming up. And that brings an end to my preview for the game against Hull. Hope you all enjoy being back at Carrow Road. Those that weren't at the friendly against Olympiacos, I'm certainly looking forward to watching football back in a competitive environment, and one where Norwich fans are looking forward to it. I think there was a couple of months probably towards the end of last season where it was difficult to summon the excitement to watch the football that Norwich were playing, but they've had a really good pre-season. Hopefully they can carry it on with a win against Hull. Obviously all the build-up and everything around it will be across our channels, so take out a Pinken Plus subscription if you haven't yet. You can do that at pinken.com/subscribe. Do all the stuff here on YouTube and keep an eye on our channels. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you very soon.